Welcome to Pink Glue. Here we are moving from YouTube to Rumble. We're going to discuss the path a little bit of that. We're also going to talk about why good always wins over evil. And for most people, it's not quite what you think. So this is what we're going to look at today. But before we get into that, I want to let you know where Pink Glue comes from. So we are women holding community together, thus Pink Glue sharing the truth. This is a lifestyle channel. We're looking at ways to be healthy, survive, take care of ourselves, and also taking care of those around us. All right, so let's step back over here. Moving on to Rumble. The exodus from MySpace was a clear example that a good thing doesn't last forever. It was good for what it was. By 2006, there was conversation that MySpace began losing its users to Facebook. But this was March of 2006. What also happened in 2006? YouTube popped up. And if we look over here at the history of that, we see that it actually was born in February of 2005. But by November of 2006, so although the conversation around MySpace losing its followers and users was May period of 2006, by November, the second swoop came in and grabbed the rest, right? When you pay $1.6 billion for a company, you know that this is going to be the winner. And look at the market share across the board that YouTube has had. And one of the big reasons why YouTube became king in this region and stayed king is the lack of friction. You can click onto YouTube anywhere, you can cast it to your screen, but they were able to use proprietary software to stop the buffering process, right? You didn't have to stop and wait, which unfortunately, as of today, is still an issue I have on my cell phone with Rumble. So this is a point that they're continuing to work on to iron out. So when we look back all these years ago, back to 2006, knowing that YouTube hit the ground running, stopped that buffering problem, and created a system that was very easy to access, easy to monitor, and easy to be relaxed and watched, YouTube really got the market share for that. Now, of course, we know that Facebook developed up into multiple different divisions. So Facebook has been called many times over the leader and kind of highlighted that. Even back in 2010, they were looking at MySpace losing to Facebook, but clearly the two were both running faster than what MySpace could do. Now, as we know, MySpace was repurchased. It's been a niche market. I don't know the financials behind it. It still exists, but it is certainly not what it was originally created to be. So what do we have? We have the move to Rumble here. Rumble has really taken a stance for truth, and it has scooped up the individuals from public domains or public spaces who have lost their site, lost their channels, lost their bank accounts. They've been the platform for freedom. And as they move forward, they've had a number of huge successes. But of course, now they've acknowledged that they did apply for an opportunity to be publicly traded, and they have their IPO ready to move forward with the trading symbol RUM. So they are moving down that path. Now, what I wanted to look at here is this conversation of good winning over evil. And we know that you can just wake up in the morning and see that's just not the case on an issue by issue or state by state basis. But we do have the manual. We know how the story ends. Yet the conversation with my son kind of backs it up into a real world. And there's a question: will good always prevail over evil in the end? Person for person, evil is more willing to do what it takes to win. The reason good wins most of the time is for every evil person, there are actually hundreds of good people. So evil is outnumbered. But you and I both know that outnumbered doesn't even matter, as we're going to look at the very last story today, the story of Gideon. But what we do know is evil, as it says here, will do anything it takes to win. Evil cannibalizes itself. So the conversation I have with my son is that, good is going to win in the long term. That's what we learn. And good allows people to choose the path of good. Evil doesn't allow choice, doesn't allow freedom, and the security it promises is all a lie. So not only does evil lie to you and I, evil lies to itself. Evil lies to those who are so-called on its team. Evil lies in so many different directions that it starts to implode on itself. And for 2.5 years, I've been drilling this into my son, that we will come out the other side. I liken it to, he and I built a tunnel. We have everything we need to move through this tunnel. We know that this country is far from the end of this cycle right now. This war is going to continue. But we do know, even though there will be a point of bringing us to our knees, the good will be the one to rise out of this, because evil turns on itself. And over these last 2 weeks, we have seen nothing but this expression coming out. And I'm just going to give 2 quick examples today, but you're going to see this more and more as the mud gets thrown between now and November, and one taking out the other. So let's go on to the next step here. Here we go. Moderna is suing Pfizer. Now, I don't know anything. I didn't pull up any of the documents in the lawsuit. I don't know the beef back and forth. They may or may not have reason to do this, but we know that neither one of these companies are on our side. And we know that for a series of reasons that have come out recently. And Tucker Carlson, Dan Bongino have been talking about this quite a bit. Even Bongino last week admitting that he did it because he felt he was backed in a corner. His life had flashed behind his eye, in front of his eyes with the cancer scare. And he absolutely regrets it. And now there's more and more information coming out that, hey, maybe this wasn't the youth elixir that we were sold it to be. However, what is interesting about this is evil is turning on evil. Did they not make enough money? In 2021, Moderna earned $12.2 billion in profit. This is not gross. When they say profit, this is net, with the majority of its total coming from this one right here. The sales of Moderna jumped 44% during 2021's final quarter, raking in $6.9 billion just in that final quarter alone. This number is higher than the $4.81 billion in sales recorded in the year's third quarter. So you could see the trajectory as people were forced to use this product. It's massive. So they didn't get enough. They're going to go after the evil on their side. Now you can say these are 2 different companies. They have their patents, they have rights. Okay, but do you know what happens in a court hearing? Documents are processed, people are deposed. Information comes out that these companies do not want to come out. So one is now turning on the other. Now we saw this second one too that was very quiet. I don't know how much even hit mainstream. If for here, I had to even dig through here on what happened. But you've got one group going against one group as if their mass trafficking across the border wasn't enough. Their seas of the city took over. But you know what it was? There was a day when, I'm trying, let's see if the next one will show here. Yeah, here we go. Oscar Blue does a phenomenal job watching our border. Now, he's been flying back and forth, monitoring both the north and south border of Mexico during this whole process. If you need to identify what the truth is at that border, you're going to go to this YouTube channel and monitor Oscar Blue. But what is really interesting is during that issue with the cartel, he was there live once again, and he showed he counted it, or estimated about 100 white sedans that pulled up, and these sedans were some form of police. And what, let me see if the article's even here. They kept moving the page as I was looking at it. There was an article that was in Spanish here. No, it's been moved already. It was right here in the middle. But in Spanish, he was let me see if I can even fast forward. Here's one. So the military arrived in order to save or rescue those that were living in Tijuana is basically the concept here. This is 1 week ago, and this is on his YouTube channel if you want to look at it. But what's amazing is it wasn't the president of the country that sent in or either authorized. In fact, the statement from the president stood up and said he doesn't understand what the right is complaining about. This is just nothing more than a peaceful conversation that's happening. Meanwhile, it was massacre. And Oscar Blue said he doesn't know when the silliness is going to stop. He picked his words very, very wisely. But when asked, well, who sent those in if the president isn't even acknowledging this? And doesn't that sound familiar? He said it was the local governor who went ahead and rallied up the troops, paid for them, and sent them in. They actually arrested, at that point, it was 11 men, which had never been done before on that scale, and brought them out of the region for what they were hoping a fair trial. Now, I haven't heard beyond that, but again, this would not have erupted if it wasn't cartel against cartel. They've gotten so powerful, they're challenging themselves. So then if we move on over here, this is one of the most explosive conversations that we've had. And if you listen to the Joe Rogan interview, which I really encourage you to listen to for yourself, there is a lot in there, sentence by sentence, and even chosen word by chosen word. And you might recall Zuckerberg was on a podcast, and at the tip of my thumb, I'm sorry, I didn't bring this up and I can't think about it. He's a gentleman of Russian descent based out of MIT, I believe. He interviews people one-on-one in kind of a dark studio. Really calm interviewer, asks some and good organized questions. He had a video where he was interviewing Mark during the summer, and it was very, very interesting because through the whole interview, you were able to see Mark puckering his lips. He would actually wrap his lips up over the other ones and pucker. And we know from understanding any sort of body language or just watching individuals, first of all, that's weird. But second of all, why is somebody doing that? They're eating their words, right? They're trying to hide something. He was lying so much that he's trying to cover his lies by pulling the lips back into the mouth. This guy's a pathological liar. We know that he wasn't the creator of this. We know that it was a gift from the government in order to develop privately to be outside that of FOIAs. But there's a series of problems with this, and we've touched on this on other conversations. But on this portion, I really want to focus on evil turning on evil. It has been said that this individual on the screen single-handedly changed the whole trajectory of the United States. Now, have there been other players involved? Yes. Has he had people pulling his strings? Yes. But this individual not only put $400 to $450 million into specific regions to popping up the voter ballot boxes randomly on street corners, and putting other money into those regions to encourage specific individuals to give their opinion and suppressing individuals. That's a huge chunk of money. That's over $500 million, almost $500 million. But if we back up and you're controlling what people see, how they see it, and you're controlling the truth that's getting out there, you're actually suppressing one story while highlighting another story, highlighting the story that is a proven lie, and manipulating people's minds to think that, oh, that one's the truth, and then suppressing a story. Well, let's go into this. We all know what's going on here, but this is really big. He came on the Joe Rogan podcast, one of the largest, I believe he's the largest podcast in the world, does a phenomenal job because of his relaxed atmosphere. He gets people just to talk, right? Oh, I'm here, I'm comfortable, just going to ask a couple questions, things come out. So I believe that this was a peek into the truth, right? And he stated that this agency had come to them, and it seemed like a casual relationship at this point. It had been going on. And they respected that agency. And when they got word from that agency, they would back down. But you're not going to respect an agency unless that agency also holds your values, your principles, and your vision. And we all remember seeing that when the last president won, individuals at both this company and at Google were actually crying. They were so upset by this turnover that they had their race that they wanted to win, and they were going to win it at any cost. And if somebody nudges you in that direction, you're going to run with it. But that you've got 1811s, federal officers who carry weapons, who come to you and suggest that maybe you want to calm down the verbiage in one area and increase the verbiage in another. And by the way, by doing that, you're going to get what you want. If the threat isn't enough of the power and the strength, then just somebody's lack of consciences is going to take them down that path. So of course, evil's going to go after evil. Mark decided it was a safe time to speak out. So he started throwing mud. He backed down a bit and he made it sound like, oh, it wasn't that bad. And by the way, throws Twitter under the bus, says, you know, we didn't do it quite as bad as Twitter. He did keep YouTube out of this conversation, as I listened to it several times and I didn't hear that. If it is, you know, please let me know that. But he's saying, you know what? We were both approached. Twitter took their route, more severe than mine, but mine was meaningful. We changed an algorithm. We didn't let people see it. Hey, you could share it amongst your friends. But then he says the algorithm would push it down on the news feed. So my experience in studying Facebook is that news feed is not just a common news feed of a site that you go to. The news feed is fed to you. And if your friend sends you something, depending on where it's on the news feed or priority, you may or may not see what your friend even sent you. So his meaningful reduction of a particular story means it is not seen. He suppressed information and specifically manipulated the outcome of election. And we know that because there have been a lot of polls since then that stated if in fact they would have known the truth on this story, and this is of course about the laptop, people would have voted differently. And the percentage is so high that there was no question the vote would have gone another way. Now we all know that the vote went another way anyways, and that hasn't been honest. But even those who did give their opinion in this other direction, when given the facts of this case, and knowing that at the time, this timestamp that Mark suggested that this agency came to them and said, hey, it might be more of that propaganda from that country. You might want to take a, you know, just kind of tread cautiously. They had that laptop for over a year at that point. That agency already knew what was on it. They knew what was coming and they interfered. And we're going to speak more on this in just a second. But it's the mudslinging back and forth that is happening. So here we have, this was yesterday at night, right? When are you going to announce a story that you really hope nobody sees? Really? That's right. Late night on a Friday night, that's when they all come out. And here we are in August of all times too. People are wrapping up their summer vacations. They're not quite at their desk. Friday night, they're getting their, you know, welcoming their kids back from school. They're in, you know, a different thought process. This is how bad that news is, that it was released on a Friday night at 9 o'clock by NBC. The day after, Mark said that this company limited polarizing story ahead of this choosing period because of a warning from this agency. The agency said it can only alert a private entity of a potential threat. They can't require it to take it down. Again, 1811s. They have badges, they have arrest authority. A suggestion or a conversation with them is a problem. And we saw this from other depositions that came out. I'm watching the words, obviously, and I know that we're on another platform here, but this will be dual posted just for this one as well. So there was a playbook that came out and we all reviewed that, and it specifically had these core tech companies on the board of the playbook that was created in how to skew in one direction. And you know what? That agency showed up they were meeting together on a number of casual events, casual conversations, and made an agreement to take this down. This is treason. No other way around it. So if you want to look more into that, I suggest going right to the source and hearing for yourself. So you're just going to want to go into Joe Rogan. Of course, Tucker covered this, and Dan Bongino, as always, did a phenomenal job covering as well. So if you don't have access directly to the podcast, you can listen to it that way. But again, evil is turning on evil. But what do we know? We have a First Amendment. This is something that was created for the people, by the people. The First Amendment to the United States Constitution prevents government from making laws that regulate an establishment of religion, or that prohibits the free exercise of religion, or abridge the freedom of speech, the freedom of the press, freedom of assembly, or the right to petition the government for redress of grievance. It was adopted in December of 1791. We've had this for a while, but this is what we all know as freedom of speech. Usually that religion part just kind of gets set aside, just like God has been set aside. And that's really important here, but we're going to focus on freedom of speech. People have the right to go to the town square and say something. Whether somebody else agrees with it or not, they have a right to say it. That's freedom of speech. That's what this country has as a core foundation. So the government does not have a right to make laws to prevent it. They also do not have a right to go to a private company, in this case publicly traded, but they do not have a right to go to a company or an organization outside of the government and force them to do something that they cannot do. This is beyond what happens in communist countries, right? They just move their train right on through the crowd and don't even get explanations. Here, they're lying left and right. They've lied so much to us that in fact, the trains come out the other side and they figure, why even lie anymore? We've won this, it's in the bag. The challenge is, again, the challenge between good and evil. Evil is turning on itself, right? They're starting to say, hey, he said, she said. They're starting to say, yeah, but you did this. And they're starting to say, you got money from this and I want it, I want my share. It's getting ripped apart, and we have not been brought to our knees yet as a country for this. But what we have coming out of this, remember the whole talk of 230? They were going to dial that back when the last president came in, because these tech platforms were claiming, hey, you know, we're private, we've got rights, we shouldn't be responsible. Well, you are responsible if you're acting as the government. If you're acting as an extension of the government and taking away constitutional rights, there's no 230 for you. And this has got to be a change that we see. So what else has this particular agency been caught with their hands in? So we have the most unprecedented, this is 4 minutes ago even, apparently we've got a come on man, right? This is coming up too. This is a bully. This is what's going on. When a bully comes up and hits somebody or takes their lunch money and they cry or they tattle, no, it's not a Karen. When a bully comes up and attacks somebody, you don't then have a right as a bully to attack somebody on and on and on and on for reacting to the attack. And this is why the former president is absolutely hated so much. Now, we've got a whole ream of good versus evil as to why that's happening. But this president, this past president, and if we want to say current, I mean, he was rightfully elected, he does not acknowledge the playbook. The playbook's been going on forever. They come up and attack you, you back down, and you take, quote unquote, time to spend with my family, right? That's what we hear all the time through government. I'm going to step down and spend more time with my family. This president doesn't play that game. He's got a mission and a goal. And many of us think that his mission has come from God. His directives come from God. And if you listen to Jonathan Cahn, about 4 months ago, he released the conversation around the Jubilee. And you may or may not believe in that conversation or the direction or the research he's pulled together. But there is something interesting there, that every 50 years is born a leader that will serve the year of the next Jubilee. And in 1947 was born a leader, as the leader of 1947 was serving in a manner in which was necessary. 50 years later was 2017. And in 2017, the leader born 50 years before that in 1947 actually acknowledged Israel again, right? We have a huge turning point, and look at all of the freedoms and conversations that come out of that, where evil has risen up even more to take it back. But what we do know is what's going on here is unprecedented. There's more questions than answers over what happened. And it isn't just this one, right? It was the whole impeachment process that we had to witness at the hand of this agency and the DOJ. And if you look at the names, I tell my son, names are important. If you're going to go to a library or bookstore and pick up a book, understand who the author is, not just because it's funny, or when you do a book report, you have the name and author and year published. Know what the author's belief system is. The author's belief system is going to tell you how that book is propaganda. And that book is either going to be swinging one direction or another direction. And as we know now, it's not just in the nonfiction space. Even fiction articles are being manipulated via our school system. Every system is being attacked right now. So this says in, this was CNN, May of 2022, this agency is doing an internal review of possible misconduct. Well, clearly that didn't go too far now, did it, based on their actions in August here? Now, what else do we have here? August 18th, 2022. This unit they're the same group, the same names that were invested in the impeachment, right? And you look and it's the same names that are investigated in the J6 conversation. It's the same people over and over again. So what I want to look for is, why is this happening? Evil pays very, very well. And we can see this on many levels. I mean, even if you look at just the last example of Mark, pays very, very well. You'd think, wow, if somebody's evil, how do they live in a big home? How do they have a jet plane? How do they have that? Because when you're stealing money from massive people, manipulating the population, you get rewarded financially. We've been warned, though, too, that it is very difficult for a rich man to make it into the gates of heaven. With more shall more be given, more responsibility. Here we've got blackmail. For those who don't want to play the game, they're caught in the game. And one of the things that I learned during the hearing that I demanded against our federal government is the layer of frustration that they had against me because I was not blackmailable. They said they kept laying things in my path and I wouldn't grab the bait. This is one of their playbooks. It may be something simple as first, and then something a little bit more next, and then it grows and grows and grows until the threat is so big, people feel they don't have a choice. And they might not feel they have a choice because they lose their elected position of a couple $100,000 a year plus full benefits and insider trading, or $500,000 a year as we have with specific individuals. It can be that they were given the gift from the government to get around black budgets and around FOIAs. Evil pays. But the challenge is, when confronted with the realization that somebody is on the wrong path, is when they need to stand up and say, no, I'm off this train. I'm willing to lose it all. I'm not playing this game anymore. So what else do we have after that, which is what we're seeing right now? People are starting to take a step off of this train. And thus retaliation comes. The action of returning, and it can be a military counterattack. It can just be he said, she said, throwing mud back and forth, which is exactly what we're seeing that Zuckerberg did. For some reason, the conversation is read to a level of embarrassment for him, to say the least. I don't think this has anything to do with him waking up and realizing the absolute evil that he himself is. However, in his evil path, somehow this agency didn't quite do what he expected it to do, and he's now, quote unquote, blowing the whistle, but I'll never call him a whistleblower, that's for sure. So I want to turn this back around here. I keep going to our manual. You know, when people first had their first baby, they say, gosh, if this child only came with a manual. Well, now there's so many books. Of course, there's different versions on how to tie your baby up, look at the taco and put him in the crib facing up or down, or how everything's out there, whether you want to read it or see the video on it. But we've been given the manual since the beginning of time. And these stories really are not just stories, as history is proving them to be true. So I want to look at one here that has come up over and over again. And this is the story of Gideon in the Bible. And if you read the Bible regularly, you might want to take another peek at this. And if you don't even own a Bible, on YouTube, they actually, you know, there's still a lot of good on YouTube. There really is. One of the stories goes into Gideon. Gideon was a judge over Israel. Although the Bible describes him as timid, Gideon is known as the greatest of all of the 15 judges. Now, this came out in 2022, so this article on Christianity was really fairly recent. But Gideon said to them, I will not rule over you, and my son will not rule over you. The Lord will rule over you. Judges 8:23. Know your place. This is God's world. But what is really amazing about Gideon is, see if it'll go down a little bit more here. Gideon and the army of 300. And I'm just going to spend a little bit of time here, but I really think if you have time, make the time. Open the Bible. Gideon and the army of 300. When God wanted Gideon to bring an army to take on the enormous Midianite army, he put out the call, and over 32,000 men showed up. This is according to Judges 7. 32,000. That's a large force. It was over 140,000 on the other side. But when you put out a call, you're not putting out a call in the public square of YouTube or Facebook, right? You're mouth by mouth. Hey, we need men. Although not as sizable as the Midianites, it's enough for Gideon to be comfortable with leading the charge. This is like a stadium full, right? But God has other plans, and he tells him, but wait a minute, if you go out there and you win with 32,000 win, people will not know this was me. They will think it is you and your army. So then the story goes on to how God reduces that number down to just 300. And the way that they win that war is, again, only because of God. And I really suggest you see how that happened, because this is the ultimate. Gideon's army of 300 were not touched or harmed or even participated in warfare. They followed the guidance they were given, and the Midianites down in the valley, evil turned against evil. In the middle of the night, they started attacking one another out of fear. They didn't know who they could trust of their own, so they destroyed themselves. This is truly the path that we're on. Evil is going to destroy evil. The challenge is, are you going to be in the path of evil when that happens? Are you going to be safely on the side listening to our Creator? So many times again, and I'll pull this up. It was very interesting that this is Bible evidences, and this is not a Christian site. But if we look down a little bit more, we see that the Bible tells us that God chooses our leaders, good or bad. We look at Saul, we look at King David. These people were far from perfect, yet God chose them in that role to further the lessons that he had for us. And if we turn over here, choosing leaders, there's enough evidence in the Bible that gives us the understanding and the security of knowing that this time on this planet has been directed and guided and is written in the book. And then if we're believing that, we have to believe that our leaders were placed in these positions by God. And if that is so, then this is God's plan playing out. Therefore, this is our opportunity to truly stand up in truth, to be there for one another, to help open the doors, to educate, and really be vigilant. As we know, there's two doors in life. One is marked freedom and one is marked security. And we've been told over and over again, whether it's Ben Franklin or any of the more current authors, that freedom is the door you want to choose over and over and over again. And everybody who chooses security based on government promises or the promise of somebody else taking care of them. And every time, those who choose security lose security and freedom. You lose it all. And yet those who choose freedom, that's the way the story goes. Okay, well, this is Pink Glue, Truth, and this is our initial launch on Rumble. Everybody, please have a blessed day, and we'll see you next time.